The public hearings into the Usindiso fire began today. The fire on the 31st of August in Johannesburg's Marshalltown claimed dozens of lives, leaving hundreds more homeless. In its initial phases, the Commission will investigate information suggesting that the death toll in this tragic blaze might be 76 instead of the previously stated 77. It will also investigate the cause of the fire and what could be done to prevent this from ever happening again. SABC News reporter Mthethwa was at the public hearings and joins us now. Mbalenhle, good evening to you and welcome. And there are vital answers that this commission is tasked to provide to the victims' families, to the city and to the residents of the city as well. Just explain to us, just architecturally, how it plans to do this.
Well, certainly the terms of the commission the first term, and which is the most important one, is the cause of the fire. So it will be investigating what caused the fire, and what we've seen happen today is that we've seen EMS services or emergency services were the first responders appearing before the commission to explain what they found, what time they responded, and what happened, and what did they find, and what was things that they felt that were of concern when they arrived. And we heard one of the witnesses who appeared today saying that there were a number of hazardous issues, and one of those, which is very important, is the fact that many of the emergency exits were blockaded. They were blockaded by a locked gate, they were blockaded by a wall that was built using bricks, and the first floor was constrained. Movement on the first floor was constrained because of the shacks, which were made out of glue laminated plywood, which is also a fire hazard. So we've heard about the fact that the building was a fire hazard to begin with, and that many of the emergency exits were blockaded, not only by the brick walls or anything like that, but also boxes, because these exits were used as storerooms. So that means there were boxes piled up in front of those doors, and where you could access the door, if there was a locked gate in front of the particular gate. And this is what caused, many people to stay inside the building, and also just dying from various conditions, like smoke inhalation and so on. So that's what we've heard so far. This is not the only witness that has testified today, though.
Mbalenhle, a lot of us were watching, and we were, of course, on air. You were on the ground when this was happening and in its aftermath. As you recount these details, it's almost this perfectly murderous situation that people who were already so desperate found themselves victim to. Speaking of the victims, this would also have been the first time probably that a lot of the stakeholders were in the same room together at the same time. What was that interaction like? What did you observe, in the pauses between the questioning and answers?
Well, certainly one of the issues that you're touching on, and this is the issue and the circumstances that the victims find themselves under. There are many desperate South Africans who find themselves looking for any form of accommodation, and they then fall victim to those who have hijacked these buildings. Now, the Commission of Inquiry is expected to look into and possibly gauge as to the extent of the problem in the city of Johannesburg. Now, it's explained this as these buildings that have been abandoned by the landlords or the owners, which have then been taken over by bogus landlords who then charge a fee to unsuspecting families or desperate people who need a home or somewhere to stay. And unfortunately, they end up living in buildings that we have heard today are hazardous and are a safety hazard. Absolutely. And are a concern to begin with. So the Commission will also be looking into that. So far, we haven't seen any of the victims or the families appearing. There are some constraints. We also ran into a few challenges this morning. The venue where the hearing is being heard is very small. They've limited the number of people who can go in to 25. We could not go in for most of the day.
Why did they do that?
It's unclear. We understand that it's unclear if they will be looking to get a much bigger venue, but we spent majority of the morning, and these were majority of media houses. It wasn't just the SABC, but it was 2 other television broadcasting news channels, 2 other radio broadcasting news channels, some radio, rather newspaper.
All right, so there was a significant media contingent that took up those spots. Right, the available spots.
No, these are the people who were not allowed inside the venue this morning. So these were the people who stayed and sat outside, and some journalists deciding to leave because they are not allowed inside.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, we then
was there a reason given as to why this decision was made, or why that restriction existed?
So only 25 people were allowed inside the building. This is because the building, I mean the room or the venue can only take up to 25 people, and this is a safety concern, and this is for safety reasons, obviously, and this is why we were not allowed inside. And we also heard that we had to, this for the first time really, that we had to have applied for accreditation 3 days prior to the event. New information for not only ourselves but all the other media houses, and the other media houses that elected to leave even before we were allowed inside the venue at around 2:30. But this was a huge concern given the public interest in the story, and the fact that we are unable to then bring the news to the people. And this is the argument that we then put forward in order to be allowed to go inside. But what's really important, again, that has come out and that we were able to establish is that while the number that was reported when the incident took place was 77, the number has been reduced to 76. Now, you will remember that when we were listening to the commissioner, to the emergency services officials who were there, they explained that they found bodies on different floors, and some of them were torn apart, and because of that they were then there was a limb that was found, and they assumed belonged to someone. Unfortunately, yes, but that's the actual head count. But the last witness who appeared before the commission told a very gruesome story of what happened when he arrived on the scene, and that of a mother who had ran up to him asking for him to save her child and couldn't because the blaze had just, flared up at the moment.
You know, this is going to be such a heart-wrenching story to cover, and I know we're talking about it as a story, but so many real lives, similar to Life is Said in Many in a way, in terms of the depth of the tragedy that we're talking about. Thank you for being able to get in, to bring us that story, and we will certainly make inquiries about whether there will be the possibility for more media and for more of the other people in the community who might want to have access. And that was our SABC news reporter Mbalenhle Mthethwa, just sharing with us the latest from that commission of inquiry, which has now kicked off public hearings into the Usindiso fire. Harrowing details shared by the EMS team on what they encountered, those first responders on the scene. Almost a perfect recipe for disaster.